Scorpio is associated with the 8th house because it is the 8th sign in the zodiac. Now, what is the 8th house about? Now, when I say the sign Scorpio, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of things that come to mind. And I think that happens with all signs. But to me, it feels like Scorpio this happens the most with the sign Scorpio in terms of the things that come to mind in reference to this sign and specifically this sign. And some things I feel they're relevant, or they have some validity, and then other things I feel are kind of one-sided, maybe pointing to something, but maybe not telling the whole truth. For that reason, Scorpio has been a pretty complicated sign to describe and to explain. Sometimes they're relegated down to like a couple of traits, and they're much more complicated sign than that. So it shouldn't be a surprise that the 8th house is equally, if not more, complicated. It is definitely a very complex house that, again, we all have. We all have an 8th house. Okay? So there's for all of us, there is an area of our life that is really complex and complicated. I like to say, whatever your issues are, this is where they go. They go to your 8th house. If there's any complex emotional, psychological issues you have, I feel like they typically show up here. I feel like they can show up in the 4th house as well. And of course, I just talked about the 4th house because remember, that house is associated with security. And in my opinion, the opposite of security is insecurity. So I would expect it to show up there as well. But if it's in security based, maybe 4th house, yes. But also the 8th house is a big place where your any like insecurities, jealousies, any psychological challenges you have, things, as I mentioned in the intro, things that people do not necessarily readily see about you. One of the reasons people don't see it is because it's a secret. And the 8th house represents secrets that you actively keep. So going back to an example, as I mentioned before, like if you are dating or married to someone whose planets fall in your 4th house, you tend to feel at home. Well, if you were dating or married to someone whose planets fall in your 8th house, they could end up being privy to these issues that you have in a way that most people will not be privy to. These issues, these psychological challenges or secrets that you are keeping from people, you probably won't keep it from the person whose planets fall in this house. You may feel more comfortable expressing these things with them, I guess depending on what the planet is, or you just feel like maybe you can trust this person. So if you've ever read the description of Scorpio, you may have heard or read that Scorpios don't necessarily trust people readily. And so as keeping in line with that, keeping in line with that, the 8th house is kind of like this too. You're not going to this is the area where you're not going to readily trust people with. Hence, the secrets that you keep here are here. The 8th house represents taking risks or going through extremes, turbulence. Sometimes our challenges that we're having in life, crises, like really heinous kind of things can show up here in the 8th house. But also the taking risk part, things that you actively decide to go out and do. Which is funny because it kind of relates to, I guess, the fifth house. You remember it said the fifth house is a risky house. But it's different. Fifth house is risky from the perspective of fun, having fun. Whereas the eighth house risks they can be life or death type risks. You're not doing it just for fun. It could be you have to take a risk, or somehow your situation is requiring you to take this particular risk, or there's something very challenging going on that's requiring the risk on your part. Sometimes the risk is money related. And by the way, this is one of the money houses in our chart. And so money issues come up here. All sorts. So this is the house that's nicknamed the house of other people's money. So we talked earlier about the second house where it had to do with earned income that you actively go out and work for. But the eighth house is not the same type of money. And by other people's money, what they're really referring to is money that you did not work for, such as royalties, residuals, loans, insurance, inheritances, money that you received as a result of a divorce, money from a spouse. Maybe you are married now. Whatever joint resources you guys have, that is an eighth house issue. So if you are a person who has a planet like, I would say, Jupiter in your eighth house, in your birth chart, you might find that people just give you money. At least this is what I've read about people that have that planet, or I guess you could say, like-minded planet in that eighth house. They find it easy. They say people just give them money. People that don't even know them just give them money. And for that reason, I think that type of person might want to look into starting a business, because they might find it fairly easy to get the support, moral support, as well as the financial support from other people to make this business work. So the eighth house tends to represent that. Eighth house often represents doing things through other people. And I think that's another thing I want you to remember. A lot of times it has to do with, as the second house is your effort, the eighth house may be somebody else's effort sometimes. And so take that into consideration as well. This house represents transformations or major changes. When I'm timing things, a lot of times if there's something drastic happening, and it doesn't have to be bad news. Getting married or having children is a drastic change, especially if you've never been married before or you don't have any children. Now all of a sudden you have a child. That's a major change to your life, major turning point. Those marked moments before you have a kid, now after. You will definitely know that your life has changed. So that's pretty much an eighth house situation. So I don't want you to think the eighth house is all dim and dark. It can be, but not necessarily.